Finally, I have completed The Last of Us Part 2 by Naughty Dog. Like so many of you, I was left heavy-hearted and speechless by the time end credits rolled. While I would not say I love it as much as the first game, I was surprised to see the amount of hate it was getting online and on YouTube when I was looking up its reviews afterward. Since I have avoided it before playing, to avoid potential spoilers and to stay neutral. Curious of why such negativity, I spent some time researching the complaints of displeased gamers and reading the angry comments of unsatisfied detractors, in an attempt to learn what kind of horrific in-game flaws I might have missed, open to have my mind educated or even changed, but ended up found a few interesting common trends among the criticism. Before I go into my findings, obviously, gaming experience is something very personal and subjective, so it is perfectly fine if some gamers did not find this Last of Us 2 experience enjoyable or appealing. After all, it was definitely not a joyful ride, so fair enough, each to their own. Who am I to judge their personal gaming experience is wrong, right? I can also understand some of the criticisms, such as misleading trailer and deceptive promotions, same old gameplay, annoying NPC movement, technical glitches, uneven story pacing, awkward inclusion of the rattlers, certain side characters could do with some improvement, etc. The game does have a fair share of minor issues, many of which reminisce of the original. However, I did also find lots of hostility toward its story and characters were woefully unjustified, because much of those criticisms did not stem from genuine flaws of the game itself, or from an impartial mindset, but rather a biased, deformed critique resulted from the disparity between the player's own expectation and the reality of what the game itself has to offer, distorted by the preconceived notions, irrational bias, and even hypocrisy. A lot of these can be spotted just by sentences such as, I wanted, I didn't want, I didn't wait 7 years for, and how dare they, followed by explicit personal demands or disapprovals. Entitled attitudes such as those are routinely less willing to be challenged and riot against what does not fall in line with their own narrow expectation. Or, worse yet, some of its vocal detractors in online forums and comment boards exhibited symptoms of toxic fanatic fandom, have not played the game themselves, but simply hate on it because of rumors or leaks, or simply echo others' opinions without giving the game a genuine chance, or form their own independent objective review with a full playthrough. So, trying to be as unbiased as I can be, I will attempt to give my 2 cents of thought. I would love to hear what you guys think. Do feel free to share your fair opinions in the comment section below. Currently, I have planned to divide my extensive analysis and debunking into 5 parts, 5 shorter, easier to manage videos. This first video will contain a brief story recap for The Last of Us 1 and The Last of Us 2, while also addressing the outcry toward the game's LGBTQ gender and diversity representation. The second video will be covering Joel's so-called character inconsistency and the fans' outrage toward his fate, the accusation of its shock value and emotion manipulation. We will also be discussing the gamer's reluctancy to pay an involuntary price and why it was a fitting end. The third video will be focusing on Ellie, her character progression, and the motivational shift from reckless vengeance to eventual forgiveness, my personal take of her final confrontation with a nightmare, and the fundamental meaning of her choice and moving forward. The fourth video will be addressing the criticism regarding Abby and discuss why she is a good character against the double standards showcased by some of her detractors, and comparing the new cast from the second game with the first to debunk accusation that Last of Us 2's new characters are two-dimensional or pointless. The last video will be about the main themes of The Last of Us Part 2, such as vengeance, forgiveness, and redemption, and why ultimately Joel's fate was not meaningless. In fact, I would argue it is an absolute must to bring this story truly alive. I will also be discussing what made Naughty Dog's method of delivery effective, even though it was unpleasant, by stripping the players of moral superiority and denying name of the chosen one complex. And finally, we will be taking a philosophical look on whether it was ever too late to save a soul from their sins. Okay, before we start, be warned, there will be lots of spoilers for The Last of Us first game and second. Are you ready? Let's roll. A quick recap of The Last of Us 1 for the unfamiliar viewers. The primary protagonist was Joel Miller, who lost his daughter Sarah during the zombie outbreak, shot by a soldier as they tried to escape. Traumatized by this tragedy, Joel became a jaded and emotionally detached hard man, until he was asked to deliver our second protagonist, a teenage girl called Ellie, to a Firefly hospital on the other side of the country. Ellie was immune from the zombie virus, and therefore provides the best chance to find a cure to save the human race. The two of them embarked on essentially a long road trip escort mission, made a few friends and killed even more foes along the way, as they gradually bonded as father and daughter. However, by the time they have arrived at the hospital, Jill found out that to facilitate a cure, they would have to kill Ellie to study her brain cells. Determined to not lose his second chance of a daughter, Jill slaughtered the Firefly group, including the doctor, and pulled Ellie out while she was in coma. The game ended with Jill lying to Ellie, told her the Firefly didn't need her because her immunity means nothing. The Last of Us 2 began 4 years later with the brutal death of Jill by the hand of Abby, the daughter of Firefly Doctor. The story was told from two perspectives, one of Ellie and one of Abby. Although Ellie resented Jill for lying and robbed her of her life meaning, she tried to save Jill but failed, and witnessed his murder first-handed. Rage-filled and grief-driven, Ellie embarked on destructive warpath, carried out increasingly questionable acts of cruelty in order to seek vengeance after Abby and her gang. Abby's side of story revolved around her journey post-vengeance, her breakaway from the authoritarian militant group, and redemptive relationship with two escapees from a rivaling religious cult. This was disrupted by Ellie when she slaughtered most of Abby's gang, but was caught ultimately. Abby chose to spare Ellie a second time and left to start a new life. However, despite having settled down into a nice, comfortable family life since the last near-death encounter, Ellie was haunted by the constant PTSD nightmare of dying Jill, and decided to hunt for Abby once again. In the end of the game, Ellie finally confronted Abby, who has been through hellish experience of her own. Ellie forced Abby to fight her one last time, but stayed her killing hand in the last second, chose to let Abby go, along with her own trauma and hatred.
Scale of 1 to 10. 1 being like absolute trash, and 10 being life-altering. How would you rate our kiss from last night?
No point in beating around the bush, so let's get this out of the way first, even though it is not even a real issue and should be common sense by now. A lot of the backlash hurled toward the game was deeply rooted in the displeasure of seeing its diverse characters and the LGBTQ representation instead of the generic traditional cis white males with badass facial hair. As a result, several of the game's important characters, such as Ellie and Dinah, a pair of proud lesbian lovers, or Abby, a straight but butch-looking woman defying the traditional expectation of feminine beauty, and an Asian transgender boy who fled from the prosecution of his cult, were loathed by fanboys before many of them even tried the game. Whereas, in real life, Naughty Dog and the game's crew have been receiving abuses or even death threats from so-called fans with transphobic, homophobic, and anti-Semitic remarks. Such toxic prejudice is easy to find here on YouTube. A simple example. Sex scenes in video games have always been a bit of a silly joke in the gaming community for its awkward and tedious portrayal. Nonetheless, in almost all cases, fans enjoyed it for what it was, even if those sex scenes were pointless in the narrative, or used solely as fan service, or atrocious in its technical execution, or even downright distasteful or disturbing given the context. Do you notice percentage-wise how much likes they have received compared to the dislikes? Now, let's check out percentage-wise how much dislikes the sex scene between Abby and Owen have received since the game's recent release. Do you notice the stark contrast? Before, someone says such vast disapproval was simply because it's bad taste or moral compass related, rather than dumb old-fashioned bigotry. Let's consider this. 1. Many of those other aforementioned video game sex scenes were not much better, yet were overwhelmingly appreciated. 2. The motivation for a large portion of the dislikes can be seen clearly by the number of gay remarks, homophobic jokes, and mockery of her muscular body type from the comment section. 3. How about let's compare that to this? That is right, my friends. Your eyes are not deceiving you. A game centered its entire premise around letting the player commit indecent, illegal assault on women has somehow received way more likes than seeing a butch woman having sex with a man, simply because Abby isn't as appealing to most male gamers' sexual fantasy, and being made to play as her engaging in unglamorous sex with another man has severely pushed him out of their heterosexual comfort zone. I'm not saying Abby and Owen's scene was great, but it is interesting to see the disparity of double standard it has received compared to other scenes of similar nature. On a similar note, compare this exceptional amount of likes those cheap, gratuitous sex scenes have received to, let's say, the overwhelming amount of hate on videos about left the transgender, or the percentage of downvote when Ellie called out a bigot as Bigot Sandwich, or when Dina talked about her Jewish faith and Holocaust, it is not hard to see how real the racial prejudice and LGBTQ discrimination still are within the gaming community. Even though there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of video games catered specifically to the traditional narrow pool of gaming demographic, some fans still complain about this mature growth as pandering, as social justice warrior agenda, or feel, but why the unnecessary changes when it could just stay the same within my comfort zone? To which I would say, but why not? To paraphrasing Ledger Joker, decades of generic white male protagonists in games and nobody batted an eyelid because it's all part of the norm. But are there few diverse casts in a game, suddenly everyone loses their minds. It is sobering to think that even anthropomorphic characters or Lego blocks had more opportunity and appreciation from the gaming community before the LGBTQ did. Perhaps those folks displeased about seeing alternative representations should ask themselves why. Like it or not, other ethnicities exist, non-cis people exist, and non-male-centric stories exist. If to tell 1,000 white male tales is acceptable, but to tell a few non-white male stories is a cause for upset, perhaps one need to ask oneself, who is the one with selfish agenda here? And instead of asking, what is the matter with them? Perhaps should try to ask oneself, what is the matter with me?
Love. How is he doing this?
Hey, do you think maybe he could convince your mom?
If she saw him like this, she'd strangle him with her bare hands. How much did he tell you?
Not much. I heard some of your people calling him Lily.
For a long time, I didn't understand why he was questioning the laws, the traditions. When he explained to me how he felt inside, I told him he had to keep it to himself. I was hoping he'd snap out of it. He seemed fine for a while. But then he shaved his head. Like one of the men. It was suicide.
Is that when you ran?
First, I screamed at him. I hit him. I was so stupid.
I have seen and heard dismissive comments such as, well, I don't have a problem with such, but just find it hard to relate with them. Or, I don't mind it really, but find it unrealistic. Or, they are fine, but I don't need to see them in my video games. I imagine none of us has ever lived in a zombie wasteland or battled herds of monsters. Likewise, very few of us had the experience of being a soldier or fought in a lawless war zone for survival. So I don't see why one should cite lack of relatability as an issue, simply because some of the characters are non-white, non-male, or non-cis, when they are way more real and realistic than the fictional Last of Us world we ventured in, and definitely far more relatable than animated Italian plumber, Speedy Hedgehog, Greek demigod, fantasy mutant warriors, or space marines battling alien invasions. Am I right? Likewise, there were never existential needs for any of these characters to be in video games since none of them were more authentic. But hey, here they are. At least the rights for diversity representation are real and genuine, and the need for it has been long overdue. Therefore, if one finds it so hard to relate to anyone other than a direct mirror image of themselves, then maybe he or she should work on the empathy issue, rather than complain about their ego and needs isn't catered to in this specific instance. I have also heard populist arguments such as, yeah, but switching a male protagonist for a female one and adding a bunch of LGBTQ characters brought nothing to the story itself except awkwardness and political agenda. At first, I was considering making a counter-argument on why their inclusion in this game is both fitting and enriching. But then I remembered, when Joe was made the protagonist of the first game, nobody ever had to make a vouching argument on why this cis straight white male hero deserved to be the lead, or how his gender has improved the story. So now why should I go to a great length just to prove Ellie deserved a title role? Just because Joe was a straight man and Ellie is a woman and a lesbian. Because seriously, if you think about it, even if in the first game we changed Joe to Joanne, a heartbroken woman turned badass Amazon after lost her daughter in the zombie apocalypse, but ultimately found a love and reason to live again through her connection with young Ellie, the entire story would still work out perfectly. So really, Joe's gender added nothing to the story. It simply existed and got accepted by the gamers without a second thought. Likewise, if we change the sexuality of Nathan Drake, the leading man from the Uncharted games, to gay or bisexual, instead of dating a journalist named Elena, he ended up with a journalist called Albert. The whole Uncharted series would still work just fine, with a few minor adjustments here and there. In other words, Nathan's sexuality also simply existed for the sake of existing, yet nobody questioned it as a political agenda. Do you start to notice the double standard now, my friends? We can apply this type of cross-examination to most straight white male characters in almost any video games, and it would have made no significant difference. Yet nobody ever complained. But somehow, now because Ellie and other LGBTQ characters entered the spotlight, all of a sudden they need good reasons just to validate their existence in the game. I think the hypocrisy speaks for itself. That any cis male characters were freely embraced and automatically accepted into this gamers club, even though their gender or sexual identity makes no difference to the story, nor contribute anything concrete to the games, while LGBTQ characters have to provide application forms of their existential value just to be recognized. In the meantime, there is also this other type of complainer from the same camp, whining about how dare Naughty Dog muddle the game with genders and sexuality instead of keeping it simple, aka straight. So, either way, the double-pronged dismissive argument employed by diversity rejectors work like this. If the LGBTQ characters just existed passively in the game without any significant purpose, it gets branded as pointless shoehorning and shallow diversity pandering that need not to be there. Yet, if the LGBTQ characters and plotline does make up a meaningful unimportant element of the game. It gets accused of forcing blatant social justice issues onto the players, and such overt political agenda ruins the gaming experience. Either way, in the mind of the rejectors, there can be no winning rationale for LGBTQ representation in video games, and it is super easy to make up excuses on why they don't belong here when one is driven by discrimination. Even though the same flawed, two-pronged accusation can be applied the same way to pretty much every white cis male protagonist that were praised and worshipped by them. While the pandering to a certain entitled group of players and the agenda to exclude others have long dominated the gaming industry for decades and been overlooked until recently.
Oh, Ellie. I think they should be terrified of you.
Hence, although I believe the inclusion of the diversity in this game does benefit it greatly, and why they are a bunch of well-written characters, and I might explore this topic in the future, but I'm not going to discuss it today as a foil to entertain the Bigot Sandwich. The likes of Ellie, Dinner, and Lev deserve the right to exist without needing extra justification, much like how the likes of Joe, Nathan, and Elena have always existed without being questioned or opposed. This is not a political agenda. This is basic equality and respect. I will stop this video here. Hopefully, some viewers will find something substantial in my commentary regarding this debate of diversity and LGBTQ in video games. And hopefully, this might also shine a light on the many discriminating attacks and sexist excuses out there masquerading as fair, objective, and biased criticism, denying the marginalized groups the chance to be seen and heard, all the while pretending such prejudice do not exist. My next video will be centered around Joe and his fate, debunking the so-called character inconsistency, and discuss why his death, although tragic, was ultimately a meaningful one. Before I sign off, even if you don't agree with me 100%, if you enjoyed my video and found value in what I had to say, please like, share, and hit subscribe. Many thanks for watching.
Ooh, look at those moves.
These moves?
Yeah.
Ooh, look at Mama go.
Mm?
Oh, wow. Ooh. Oh, hello.
This is kind of working on me.
You're weird.
I'm aware. Okay. Okay, you're distracting me.
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Go.
Okay.